The widow, Clara, had grown accustomed to the quiet of her little farmhouse. Her husband had been gone 3 winters now, leaving her with only the echo of his voice in the hallways and the stubborn weeds in her garden. The wind moaned across the barren fields, rattling the shutters, as if reminding her that life moved on whether she was ready or not. It was during one of these bitter evenings that she heard the weak, desperate groan near the edge of the forest. At first, she thought it was a trapped animal, but then she saw him a man, lying face down in the snow, half covered in frost. His clothes were torn, and his face was smeared with dirt and blood. Something in his eyes, though, made her pause, a fierce, unbroken spirit, even in weakness. Without a second thought, Clara ran outside, wrapping him in her thick woolen shawl and carrying him to the warmth of her kitchen. She laid him carefully by the fire and rushed to fetch hot water and bandages. The man shivered violently, but he didn't speak, only groaning softly with every attempt to move. Clara, trembling herself, treated his wounds as best as she could. Her hands shook not from fear, but from the sudden weight of responsibility. She was holding the life of a stranger in her hands. Hours passed in silence, broken only by the crackle of the fire and the occasional groan from the man. When he finally opened his eyes, Clara caught a glimpse of deep dark eyes that held a mixture of pain, caution, and something else she couldn't name, perhaps curiosity. "Who are you?" she asked softly. He tried to speak, but only a hoarse whisper escaped. Clara realized he was too weak. She fetched more blankets and fed him a spoonful of warm broth, marveling at how fragile he looked. Yet still carrying an aura of authority. In the days that followed, Clara nursed him carefully. She discovered he was strong, resilient, and wary of outsiders. He didn't speak much, but occasionally he would sketch signs in the dirt with his fingers, tribal symbols she didn't understand. Gradually, she realized that this was no ordinary traveler. He carried himself with the calm assurance of someone who had led men into battle and survived. Her neighbors began to murmur. They noticed the stranger visiting her farm, and though they didn't know the full story, suspicion brewed. Clara ignored them. She had taken an oath, not to any person or law, but to her own sense of decency. She would not abandon a life in need. As the man's strength returned, Clara began to notice small gestures, the way he observed the sunrise with reverence, how he treated her belongings with care, and the quiet, thoughtful manner in which he spoke when he finally managed a few words. One evening, he said his first full sentence, halting and cautious. "Thank you for saving me." It was simple, but the words carried weight. Clara felt a strange stirring in her chest, a mixture of relief and something more, a bond forming between them, unspoken but undeniable. She realized that her life, so long defined by solitude and loss, was suddenly intertwined with this man who had emerged from the snow like a force of nature, both fragile and powerful. Little did she know, the stranger she had saved was no ordinary man. He was a Lakota war chief, hunted by enemies who would not forgive weakness. Her kindness had spared a life, but it had also tied her fate to a man whose world was as dangerous and vast as the open plains. And as the first snow melted into spring, Clara knew that life as she had known it was about to change forever. Spring had barely touched the fields when Clara realized the danger her kindness had brought. The wounded man, now strong enough to sit and walk slowly, remained a mystery, though small hints of his true identity began to surface. He carried himself with a quiet authority that was impossible to ignore. Clara noticed the way he scanned the horizon as if reading some invisible threat, and the careful precision with which he handled tools, prepared food, and tended the fire. He was no ordinary traveler. One morning, as sunlight streaked across the kitchen floor, he finally spoke more clearly. "I must move soon," he said, his voice steady now but carrying an undercurrent of urgency. Clara frowned. "Why?" she asked. You're safe here. You can rest as long as you need." He shook his head, eyes darkening. "Safe, for now. But others are searching. They would not spare me." Clara's heart tightened. She had begun to feel protective of him, not just because he was a stranger in need, but because she could sense the weight of the life he carried. She wanted to ask who he truly was, but something told her he would reveal it on his own terms. The first sign of trouble came that afternoon. A group of men from the neighboring settlement rode near her property, their horses kicking up clouds of dust. Clara's heart raced. She hadn't told anyone about the stranger. They had no right to know, yet their gaze lingered suspiciously on the farmhouse. She ran to him, grabbing his arm. "They're coming. You have to hide." He nodded, a brief flash of gratitude in his eyes. They worked together silently, he moving with precision, she following instinctively. They guided him into the hidden cellar she had used to store preserves, a place few knew existed. She covered the entrance with blankets and old crates. From the kitchen window, she watched the men ride slowly past, muttering to each other. Clara exhaled in relief, though she knew the danger had only begun. That night, by the dim glow of the fire, he finally revealed more of himself. "I am of the Lakota," he said, voice firm, measured. "A chief, my people. Need me." Clara's eyes widened. She had heard tales of the Lakota, fierce warriors who defended their land with unmatched skill. "A chief?" she whispered, feeling the weight of the truth sink in. "You mean you lead them?" He nodded. "Yes, and now enemies pursue me. I would not survive without your mercy." The reality struck her. Her small act of kindness had spared not just a life, but the life of a man of immense power and responsibility. She realized the enormity of what she had done and the risks she had taken. Yet fear was tinged with admiration. There was a quiet nobility in him, a strength tempered by hardship, and a depth that drew her in despite the danger. In the days that followed, they grew closer. He taught her simple words in his language. She shared her small routines, her garden, her home. They laughed quietly, sharing moments of vulnerability until the walls between them seemed to shrink. Yet, beneath every smile, Clara could sense the storm approaching, the hunters who would not stop until they found him, the danger that shadowed every step he took. One evening, under a sky painted with the colors of sunset, he turned to her. "You saved me, Clara, not just my body, but my life. And for that, I owe you everything." She looked at him, realizing that her life had shifted irrevocably. The quiet widow who had lived only for survival was now entangled with a man whose existence was perilous, powerful, and untamed. And deep down, she knew that saving him was only the beginning of a story neither of them could yet fully imagine. The morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of wet earth and blooming wildflowers. Clara had grown used to the presence of the Lakota chief in her home, yet an unease settled in her chest like a stone. She had begun to feel a fragile peace, a rhythm of two lives overlapping, but the outside world refused to leave them alone. It began with the sound of distant voices, shouting over the hills. Clara froze, clutching the shawl around her shoulders as the chief moved silently toward the window. His dark eyes scanned the tree line, sharp and calculating. "They have found the trail," he said quietly. "We must be ready." Clara's stomach tightened. She had known the danger existed, but hearing it confirmed filled her with a mix of fear and determination. "What do we do?" she asked, her voice trembling. He turned to her, placing a steady hand on her shoulder. "Stay here. Hide. Trust me." His voice was firm, but beneath it, Clara sensed a flicker of worry. She nodded, though the thought of sitting idle while danger approached made her restless. Hours later, the sound of hooves grew louder. Clara watched from her hidden vantage point in the kitchen, heart hammering. 3 men rode cautiously through the yard, their eyes sweeping over the farmhouse. The chief had moved outside, invisible among the trees, his movements silent, deliberate. Clara felt a rush of awe and fear. Then came the first warning. A shout pierced the air. "Over here!" "She's hiding him!" Clara's breath caught in her throat. The men were closer than she feared. She glanced toward the cellar entrance, where the chief had instructed her to remain hidden. She clutched the blankets around her, praying silently. From the shadows, the chief struck. He moved like a phantom, disabling the first rider before the second could raise an alarm. Clara pressed herself against the wall, eyes wide, watching in disbelief as he fought with precision and strength that seemed almost supernatural. In moments, the threat was neutralized, not killed, but incapacitated enough to prevent pursuit. The men fled, shouting, their horses pounding the earth. Clara ran outside, relief washing over her as she saw the chief return, unscathed yet tense. He looked at her with something between admiration and concern. "You are brave," he said softly. "Not many would. Stay hidden and survive such a test." Clara shook her head, words failing her. "I didn't? I couldn't just do nothing. You saved me in the forest. I owe you." He silenced her with a gesture, his dark eyes meeting hers. "No, we owe each other," he said. "You saved me with your kindness. I protect you with my skill." The night fell, carrying with it the soft hum of crickets and the faint scent of pine. They sat by the fire, silent for a time, each contemplating the events of the day. Clara realized that fear and admiration had begun to blend into something more, something she could not name but felt deeply in her chest. She was no longer just a widow. She was a companion to a man of honor, courage, and danger. "I need to return to my people soon," he said finally, voice heavy. "But before I leave, I must ensure your safety." "They will not stop searching." Clara's heart sank, but she nodded. She understood. Her life had changed irreversibly. This stranger, this chief, had brought danger, excitement, and purpose into her quiet existence. And yet, despite the peril, she could not imagine letting him go without understanding the full depth of their connection. That night, under the glow of the hearth, Clara made a silent promise to herself. She would face whatever came next with courage. She had saved a life once, and now, bound to this man by fate and mercy, she would see it through, even if it meant stepping into a world she had never known, where danger and loyalty danced together like fire and shadow. The morning sun cut through the mist, casting long shadows across Clara's fields. Though the air was calm, an uneasy tension clung to the farmhouse. Clara had spent the night thinking about the chief's words, the danger that was closing in, the enemies who would not stop until they found him. She had nursed many wounds in her life, but nothing had prepared her for the peril that now loomed over her home. The chief, whose name she had learned was Matu, moved with quiet precision. Every sound he made, every motion he took, seemed purposeful. Clara watched him as he checked the perimeter of the house, his dark eyes scanning the tree line with a focus that was almost otherworldly. He was no ordinary man. He was a predator and a protector, honed by battles she could barely imagine. "Clara," he said, voice low and urgent, "we cannot wait. They will return, and they will be clever. We must be ready." Clara's pulse quickened. She wanted to protest, to hide again, but something in Mato's gaze silenced her. "What do you need me to do?" she asked, her voice steadier than she felt. He paused, studying her, and for the first time she saw a flicker of vulnerability in him. "Stay close. Watch, listen, and trust your instincts. You are brave, more than you know." Hours passed in tense silence. Clara followed him cautiously as he moved around the property, setting traps and using the natural cover of the trees to mask their movements. He showed her how to make noise in one area to mislead pursuers and how to move unseen through brush and shadow. Every lesson was sharp, precise, and terrifyingly practical. By mid-afternoon, the sound of hooves reached them again. This time, more men approached, armed, determined, and searching with intent. Clara's stomach knotted, but Mato's presence steadied her. He moved like a shadow through the trees, guiding her, whispering instructions. When the men arrived at the farmhouse, they found the place seemingly empty. But Mato had predicted their path. Using the traps he had set, he disarmed 2 men before they could sound an alarm. Clara's heart pounded as she watched him fight with calm, lethal precision. Yet there was no malice in his movements, only necessity and survival. One of the men lunged toward the cellar where Clara hid. Without hesitation, she grabbed the nearest heavy object and struck, managing to knock him off balance. Her heart raced, but Mato's voice reached her through the chaos. "Good. Stay hidden, stay alive." In the end, the intruders fled, injured and humiliated but alive. Clara emerged from the cellar, shaking but unhurt. Mato approached, his expression a mixture of admiration and concern. "You were brave," he said softly. "You saved yourself and helped me. Many would have cowered. You did not." Clara felt a warmth spread through her chest, a mix of pride and something deeper, a connection that had grown between them during the terror. She realized that fear had forged a bond stronger than any calm day ever could. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Mato tended to his few minor wounds, and Clara worked alongside him, passing him bandages and water. Silence settled between them, but it was comfortable, a shared understanding. She looked at him, at the strong, scarred, and noble figure of the man she had saved, and felt her own courage solidifying. "You cannot stay here forever," Clara said softly, though she dreaded the thought of him leaving. "No," Matu replied, his eyes distant. "But you have given me more than shelter. You have given me trust, compassion. That is rarer than any weapon or armor." For the first time since he had arrived, Clara allowed herself to see the truth. She was no longer simply a widow tending her lonely farm. She was part of a story far larger, entwined with a man whose life depended on her courage and whose heart had begun to mirror her own quiet strength. And, as night fell over the fields, Clara knew the coming days would test both of them and that nothing would ever be the same again. The morning dew clung to the grass, and Clara could feel a quiet tension in the air, as if the land itself had sensed the coming storm. The farmhouse, once a haven of solitude, had become a crossroads of danger and destiny. Matu, the Lakota war chief she had saved, moved with the precision of a man who had faced countless threats, yet even he seemed restless, aware that their temporary peace could vanish at any moment. Clara had grown accustomed to his presence, yet each glance he gave her carried the weight of unspoken gratitude and something far more complex. She had begun to see the strength beneath his exterior, the quiet vulnerability that only she seemed able to glimpse. In return, he observed her with a careful admiration, as if discovering the hidden courage that had carried her through years of loss. The first warning came mid-morning. A distant shout echoed across the fields, sharp and urgent. Clara's heart skipped. "They've returned," she whispered, the words trembling on her lips. Matu nodded. "Yes, but this time, they are many. We must move carefully." He led her to a concealed path behind the farmhouse, one she had never noticed, which wound into the forest. The trees formed a natural barrier, but Clara could sense the danger lurking beyond their leafy walls. They crouched in the underbrush, watching as a group of armed men approached the farmhouse, their eyes scanning for signs of life. Clara's pulse raced. She had never handled a weapon in her life, but Matu handed her a small knife, his grip firm yet reassuring. "Use this only if necessary," he whispered. "Trust yourself." The hours passed in tense silence. Mato moved like a shadow, intercepting threats before they could reach her, guiding her with gestures and quiet commands. She learned quickly, her fear sharpened into focus. Every rustle of leaves, every snapping twig, became a signal. She felt her instincts awaken in ways she hadn't thought possible. By mid-afternoon, the men had realized the farmhouse was empty. Frustration etched their faces as they searched the surrounding fields. Clara and Mato remained hidden, hearts pounding, breaths shallow. Finally, as the sun dipped low, the intruders retreated, their shouts fading into the distance. Exhausted but unharmed, Clara and Mato returned to the farmhouse. The encounter had been a test of courage and resilience, and they both knew it. Mato, tending a minor cut on his arm, looked at her with a mixture of pride and something softer, almost tender. "You were brave," he said. "You did not falter." Clara's cheeks flushed. I only followed your lead," she murmured, though she knew she had faced her own fear. Mato's gaze held hers for a long moment. "You are more than a widow, more than a survivor. You are strong, wise, and compassionate. That strength saved me as much as I protected you." The words lingered between them, heavy with meaning. Clara realized that her life, once defined by loss and solitude, had been irrevocably changed. She no longer moved through the world in quiet shadows. She had become a participant in a larger story, one of courage, danger, and an unexpected bond that neither distance nor threat could diminish. As night fell, they sat together by the fire, sharing small comforts, warm broth, blankets, the quiet rhythm of two lives intertwined. Mato spoke of his people, of the battles he had fought, and the duty that called him back to them. Clara shared stories of her late husband, her struggles, and her fleeting moments of hope. By the time the embers glowed low, Clara understood the truth. She had not only saved a life, but she had touched the life of a man whose world was larger and more perilous than she could have imagined. And in turn, he had illuminated a strength within her she had long forgotten. Outside, the forest whispered with the night wind, carrying both danger and promise. Clara knew the path ahead would test them both, but for the first time in years, she felt ready to face whatever came next side by side with the man she had saved, and who had, in ways she could not yet name, saved her as well. The first light of dawn barely touched the fields when Clara awoke to the sound of distant commotion. Her heart raced before she even opened her eyes, the memory of past threats flooding her mind. Matu, ever alert, had already risen and moved to the edge of the clearing, listening intently. Clara watched him silently, noting the tension in his shoulders, the sharpness in his gaze. "Today would not be like the others. They are coming again," he whispered, voice low but steady. "This time, they will not retreat so easily. We must be ready." Clara swallowed hard, fear gnawing at her, but she remembered his earlier lessons. Trust her instincts, act decisively, and stay close. She nodded, her resolve hardening. She had saved a life once, but now she was part of something larger, a fight for survival, loyalty, and honor. The first signs were subtle. A snap of a twig, the murmur of voices carried on the wind. Mata moved with fluid precision, guiding Clara into the thicker forest where shadows blended with trees. He handed her a small satchel containing herbs, a knife, and a length of rope. "These may save you or us," he said, eyes dark with determination. "Use wisely." The enemy arrived shortly after, a group twice the size of the last. Clara crouched beside Mata, heart hammering, as he silently neutralized the scouts approaching their path. She watched, awe mixing with anxiety, as he disarmed one man with a swift, precise motion, then incapacitated another without making a sound. Then one of the men strayed too close to Clara, Instinct surged through her, and without thinking, she hurled a rock, striking him on the shoulder. He stumbled, giving Matu the opening he needed. Clara's pulse raced as she realized she had just acted not out of fear, but out of courage. Matu looked at her briefly, his expression unreadable, then returned to the task at hand. "Well done," he said quietly once the danger subsided. "You have grown stronger today, strong enough to face what comes next." By midday, the intruders had been repelled, but it was clear this was not the end. Mato knew he could not remain in hiding forever. "I must leave soon," he said, voice heavy. "My people, they need me, and my enemies will not stop searching." Clara felt a pang of fear and sadness. She had grown to depend on his presence, and yet she understood the duty that called him away. "I will help you," she said softly. "Whatever you need." Matu reached out, placing a firm hand over hers. "You have already done more than most would dare. You have saved me, Clara. Not just my body, but my life. Your courage, your kindness. It has changed everything." The bond between them deepened, silent but undeniable. They moved together as night fell, setting traps, clearing paths, and preparing for the journey that lay ahead. Clara felt a surge of empowerment she had never known. She was no longer the quiet widow in her farmhouse. She was a partner in a fight for survival, and she would face it with every ounce of her strength. As the stars emerged overhead, Mata shared quiet stories of his people, the Lakota, their traditions, their battles, and the honor they upheld. Clara listened, captivated, her fear replaced by admiration and a growing, unspoken affection. She understood that saving him had been only the beginning of their journey together, and as they settled for the night under the canopy of ancient trees, Clara realized something profound. Life had thrust her into a world she never imagined, dangerous and vast, yet filled with courage, loyalty, and an unexpected connection. The dawn would bring new trials, but she no longer feared them, not with Matu by her side, and not with the fire of her own courage burning brighter than ever. The forest was alive with tension as dawn broke over the horizon. Clara felt every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig, as if the trees themselves were whispering warnings. She and Matu had been on edge for days, anticipating the inevitable confrontation with the men who pursued him. Yet now, standing side by side, she realized how much she had changed since that first winter day when she had discovered him, bloodied and shivering in her woods. "They will come through this path," Matu murmured, his hand brushing against hers for a brief, grounding moment. "Stay close. Trust what you have learned." Clara nodded, heart pounding, her fingers tightening around the small knife he had taught her to wield. Fear still surged within her, but it was tempered by the knowledge that she had already faced danger before and survived. This time she would not cower. The first wave of men appeared, their shadows stretching across the forest floor. Clara felt her breath hitch as she spotted the glint of weapons and the determined faces of the hunters. Mato moved like a shadow, fluid and silent, intercepting the first pair before they could reach her. Clara watched, awestruck, as he disarmed one man with a swift twist and knocked the other unconscious with careful precision. Then came a shout of warning to the rest of their group. Clara's pulse surged. One of the men broke from cover, charging toward her. Instinct took over. She sidestepped, grabbed a loose branch, and swung with all her strength. The man stumbled, giving Mato the opening to finish the attack. Clara gasped, her hands trembling, but Mato's dark eyes met hers, steady and approving. "You are ready," he said quietly, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. Braver than most men I have known, together they moved through the trees, weaving between shadows and setting small, clever traps that slowed the pursuers. Clara realized she had learned not just survival, but strategy, patience, and the quiet thrill of courage in the face of imminent danger. She and Matu worked in perfect harmony, their movements almost instinctual, a dance of trust and precision. By midday, the last of the men had been driven off, retreating with bruises, confusion, and frustration. Clara sank to the ground, exhausted but exhilarated. Mata knelt beside her, checking his own minor injuries before turning his full attention to her. "You have done more than save yourself," he said softly, his voice low with admiration. "You have saved me." Again. "Your courage, your presence, it has made the difference between life and death." Clara felt a warmth spread through her chest, not just pride, but a deeper connection she could no longer ignore. She had begun to care for him, not merely as a man she had saved, but as someone who had changed her world completely. The widow who had lived quietly, fearing the world beyond her walls, now felt alive, fierce, and connected. As they rested beneath the shade of a sprawling oak, Mata shared stories of his people, the Lakota warriors, the battles, the losses, and the bonds of honor that held them together. Clara listened, entranced, seeing not just the warrior but the man behind the legend, a man shaped by responsibility, loyalty, and the fierce need to protect those he loved. Night fell, and the stars reflected in their quiet eyes. Clara realized that danger, which had once seemed insurmountable, had forged a bond between them stronger than any fear. Mata had become more than a stranger, more than a chief. He had become a companion, a guide, and perhaps, in ways neither dared to speak, the beginning of love. The forest was quiet now, but Clara knew this peace was temporary. The enemies would return, the challenges would come, and the trials would continue. But she also knew she was no longer alone. Together, she and Matu were a force shaped by courage, trust, and the unspoken promise that no matter the peril, they would face it side by side. The following morning, a soft mist clung to the fields as Clara stirred from a restless sleep. Her muscles ached from the previous day's confrontation, yet there was a spark of exhilaration in her chest that made her sit up straight. She glanced at Matu, who had risen before her, moving silently as if the forest itself obeyed his presence. "You rest too little," she said softly, voice still thick with sleep. He glanced over his shoulder, a faint smile touching his lips. "I sleep when I can," he replied, tone gentle but firm. "There is much to do, and time is short." "The enemies do not forget," Clara nodded, sensing the weight he carried, not just the immediate danger, but the responsibilities that came with being a chief of his people. There was a gravity to him she had not fully understood until now, a blend of power, duty, and unspoken sacrifice. As they prepared a modest breakfast, Mata shared a story of his childhood, a time before war, before the weight of leadership fell upon him. Clara listened intently, captivated by the vulnerability hidden beneath his fierce exterior. She realized that the man she had saved was not merely a warrior, but someone who bore the burdens of an entire people. The knowledge deepened her respect and admiration, and something warmer, more intimate, began to bloom. "I never knew," Clara said softly, hesitant. "I never realized how much a person can carry inside them." Mata looked at her, eyes steady and dark. "Few see it. To lead, to survive, sacrifices must be made. You have seen only a part of it." His voice softened. "But you have given me something I have not known in years, trust, kindness, and peace, even if brief." Her cheeks warmed at his words. She realized how much their bond had grown, from the first moment she had pulled him from the snow to now, when danger had drawn them closer in ways she could not have imagined. And yet, beneath the admiration and burgeoning affection, Clara understood that their lives were fraught with peril. Every moment spent together was shadowed by the enemies pursuing him, by the obligations he could not ignore. That afternoon, as they walked along the forest edge, Mata paused and handed her a small token, a carved piece of wood in the shape of a hawk. For courage, he said simply, to remind you of what you have shown. Not many can face fear and act with wisdom and strength. You have. Clara took it, feeling the weight of both the gift and the meaning behind it. It was more than a token. It was acknowledgment of her growth, her bravery, and the silent bond forming between them. She felt her heart stir, a warmth that contrasted sharply with the chill of the forest and the danger that lingered around them. That evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in shades of crimson and gold, Clara and Matu sat together by the fire. Words were few, but the silence spoke volumes. Each glance, each small gesture carried layers of trust, respect, and something far more intimate. You have changed my life, Matu said finally, voice low and earnest. And yet, I fear the world will take you from me before I can truly protect you. Clara reached out, her hand resting lightly on his. Then let us face it together, she whispered. Whatever comes, we face it as one. For the first time since he had appeared in her life, Mata allowed himself a moment of relief. Here, in the quiet warmth of her home and heart, he felt a fleeting sense of peace, a fragile hope that the bond forged by survival and kindness could endure even the storms ahead. The night deepened, carrying with it the soft murmur of wind through the trees. Clara lay awake, thinking of Matu, of the dangers yet to come, and of the strange, powerful way their lives had intertwined. She realized that her quiet existence was over. Her life was now a story of courage, loyalty, and an unexpected love that neither distance nor peril could easily undo. The dawn was pale and gray, shrouding the forest in mist as Clara and Matu moved cautiously through the undergrowth. The previous days of uneasy peace had left them both alert, every sense sharpened by anticipation. Clara had learned to read the slightest sound, the faintest movement in the trees, and she now felt a quiet pride in the courage that had grown within her. They are close, Matu murmured, his voice low but steady. I feel them. They will strike soon, and we cannot hide forever. Clara's chest tightened, but she nodded. She had learned to trust him, not just for protection, but in the shared understanding of danger and survival. Her own fear was tempered by determination. She would not flee. She would stand beside him. Hours passed in tense silence. Then came the first sound, a rustle of leaves, followed by a sudden shout. A band of armed men burst into the clearing ahead, their eyes scanning for any sign of movement. Clara's heart pounded as Mata moved forward, a blur of precision and strength, intercepting the first attackers with calm, deliberate force. Clara ducked behind a tree, gripping the small knife Mata had given her. She had never imagined herself in such a moment, yet instinct guided her. When one man broke from the group, charging toward her, she swung the knife with surprising accuracy, striking him in the shoulder. He fell back, stunned, and she felt a surge of empowerment, a mixture of fear and exhilaration she had never known. Matu engaged the others with the skill of a seasoned warrior, disarming, blocking, and redirecting each attack. Clara watched, heart racing, feeling both awe and deep admiration. Then, when another man attempted to flank her, Matu's voice cut through the chaos. Clara, now! She followed his instructions without hesitation, pulling the rope he had prepared earlier to trip the man. He tumbled to the ground, giving Mata the opportunity to finish the encounter. The remaining attackers, seeing their comrades incapacitated, fled into the trees, leaving the clearing eerily silent. Clara sank to the ground, her hands trembling, her body exhausted but alive. Mata approached, checking his own minor injuries before turning to her with a mixture of pride and concern. You have grown stronger than I could have imagined, he said softly. You have faced danger and acted with courage and wisdom. Not many could do what you have today. Clara looked at him, her own emotions a tangled web of relief, admiration, and something deeper, something she was only beginning to understand. I could not have done it without you, she said, voice quiet but steady. Matu shook his head, dark eyes holding hers. No, we did this together. You have proven your courage, your heart, and your strength. You have saved more than just yourself, you have saved me. As the forest grew still again, Clara realized that the bond between them had been solidified not through words or gestures alone, but through fire, fear, and shared survival. They had faced danger side by side, and in doing so, had come to rely on one another in ways that transcended friendship. That night, as they built a small fire beneath a canopy of stars, Mato spoke quietly of his people, his duties, and the road ahead. Clara listened, her heart full of admiration and a sense of belonging she had never experienced before. She understood that their journey was far from over, that danger would return, but she also knew that whatever came, they would face it together. For the first time, Clara allowed herself to imagine a future beyond solitude, a life intertwined with Matu, forged by courage, trust, and an unspoken growing love. And as the fire crackled and the forest whispered around them, she realized that the choice to save a life had led her to something far greater, a connection that neither peril nor distance could break. The dawn broke with an uneasy stillness. The forest bathed in pale gold light. Clara felt the tension in the air like a living thing curling around her chest. Today would not be like any day before. Mato, standing beside her, seemed even more alert than usual, his dark eyes scanning every shadow, every movement. "They know we are here," he said softly, voice carrying both warning and calm determination. "This is the moment we can no longer avoid. We must face them together." Clara nodded, gripping the small knife in her hand and feeling the weight of the rope and herbs they had prepared. Fear rippled through her, but beneath it surged a strength she had never known, a courage born from days of survival, trust, and the bond that had grown between them. She would not falter. The first intruders appeared, emerging from the trees like shadows come to life. Clara's pulse raced, but Matu moved ahead, fluid and precise, engaging the men with the skill of a seasoned warrior. Clara followed his lead, setting traps they had prepared and using every lesson he had taught her. One man lunged at her, wild-eyed and desperate. Clara dodged instinctively and, with a swift motion, used the rope to trip him. He fell to the ground, stunned, and Matu took care of the rest. Clara's heart pounded with exhilaration. She was no longer a bystander in her own life. She was a participant, a force, standing beside the man she had saved. The battle was fierce but brief. The intruders, unprepared for the unity and skill of Clara and Matu, retreated, leaving the clearing silent once more. Clara sank to the ground, exhausted but alive, her hands trembling from adrenaline. Matu knelt beside her, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You have done more than survive," he said, voice low, almost reverent. "You have proven yourself, not only brave but wise. You have saved more than a life. You have saved me." Again and again, Clara looked at him, the firelight dancing in his eyes. "I only did what I had to," she whispered, though she felt the weight of every danger, every shared moment, and every lesson they had endured together. "But I wouldn't have survived without you either." Matu reached for her hand, holding it firmly yet gently. "No, we are stronger together. You taught me trust, compassion, and courage in ways I had long forgotten. And you have taught yourself the same." A quiet understanding passed between them, deeper than words could capture. The widow and the war chief, once strangers brought together by fate, now stood as partners forged by danger, loyalty, and an unspoken bond that had grown into something neither of them could deny. As the sun rose higher, Matu spoke of his return to his people. "I must go back to lead them," he said, tone heavy with responsibility. "But I will not forget you, Clara. what you have done. It will remain with me always." Clara felt a pang of sorrow, yet hope flickered in her heart. "And I will not forget you," she said, voice steady. "Whatever happens, our paths will always be connected." Before he departed, Mato handed her a small token and intricately carved hawk. "For courage," he said, repeating the words from earlier, though now they carried the weight of eternity. "And for the bond we share. No matter the distance, this will remind you of what we endured and what we became." Clara took it, holding it close. She realized then that her quiet life had ended the moment she chose to show kindness to a stranger. In saving Matu, she had saved herself from loneliness, fear, and the shadow of grief. She had found courage, trust, and a love that transcended danger, culture, and expectation. As Matu disappeared into the distance, his figure strong and resolute against the morning light, Clara stood on the edge of the forest, breathing in the crisp air. She felt alive, empowered, and ready for whatever the world would throw at her. The widow had saved a life, but in doing so, she had discovered the extraordinary life that was hers all along. The forest whispered with the wind, carrying both the memory of danger and the promise of hope. Clara smiled softly, clutching the carved hawk, knowing that love, courage, and kindness had forever changed her world.